idea of a perfect school is one in which there are no children at all.
That is so 2020.
We want our kids back in the classroom on day one of term one.
We're going to be there day one, term one.
One of the many issues on the list at today's National Cabinet meeting, a last-minute COVID safety plan for schools.
We need the schools open and we need them to stay open. That if schools aren't open, we could see the peak furloughing of our workforce go from 10% to 15%.
States and territories are now individually weighing up the decision to use rapid antigen testing in schools, with each to introduce slightly different rules to be announced over the coming days.
Where surveillance testing is elected to be done by a state and territory, the federal government will be supporting that 50-50.
But if you have 4 million school kids multiplied by 2 rats per week divided by a serious shortage of rats, what exactly do you get?
The exact considerations states are weighing up in deciding whether to proceed with such a program.
Meanwhile, the PM is denying the Commonwealth has been hoovering up rat supplies.
These claims are categorically untrue.
And faced with fears of a teacher shortage, New South Wales is trying to bolster the workforce, with reports that even corporate staff within the Education Department could be asked to relocate to the classroom.
We know that many teachers have retired recently. We know that we have many younger students in their final year. New South Wales has done a call out to those teachers.
But despite a shortage of workers across the board, there'll be no change to the definition of a close contact.
We believe we have that balance right.
Or to the length of ISO.
Every time you shorten that period, there is an increase in the risk of transmission.
The PM instead spruiking job numbers.
Where we have around 250,000 people more in jobs today than when the pandemic started.
Faced with a lack of rats, a staff shortage and a healthcare system in crisis, will that optimism last?
Saving lives, saving livelihoods, protecting against the future, one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, that's what our response has been delivering.
And Finance Minister Simon Birmingham joins us now. Minister, you've got the lowest unemployment figures in 13 years. Congratulations on those numbers. But the survey period doesn't include the devastating impact of OMICRON. What sort of numbers will you be expecting once that is all taken into account?
I think we should still have lots of cause for optimism across Australia. Australians and our economy have shown enormous resilience throughout COVID-19. Job ads are actually still higher today, around 20% or so higher today than they were this time last year. So we can still see some of that resilience across the economy. In fact, our job numbers have beaten every expectation every time people have challenged it. The Labor Party said when we went into recession that the test of how we managed the economy was whether or not the employment market came back, whether people were in jobs. Well, the proof is that they are. Of course, Omicron is causing difficulties for many right now, but many of those difficulties are actually labour market shortages, staff shortages, because people can't go to work. And obviously, as we pass the peak over the next few weeks of this current wave, then hopefully we'll see more Australians able to get back to work and more of that normality return.
But Minister, apart from the fact that you haven't answered my question, over the past month, we've spoken to people from almost every sector that you can think of. Shops are closing, they're empty, they're cutting staff. Hospitality is a complete disaster. Employers are reducing hours. Is that not going to put a serious dent in the economy and those job numbers?
No doubt people are hurting at present, but this is a temporary wave that we're seeing in terms of Omicron. COVID, we are going to have to continue to manage, to work through and to deal with all of its different circumstances. But all of the health experts are pretty much saying we are at or close to the peak across most Australian states. And so as we come off of that peak, along with the continued information and evidence we've got, along with our very high vaccine and booster rates, around 1 million booster doses being administered across every 3 days at present, this is going to provide the ability for Australia to bounce back strongly, I'm sure. As we have from every other lockdown, from every other disruption so far, our economy has shown its resilience, as have the businesses and people of Australia.
Can we talk about schools for a moment? You said you're going to split the cost 50-50 with the states to get rapids into schools. I mean, I don't know if you've heard, but there's a serious rapid shortage. Can you promise that every child that needs a rapid in a school is even going to be able to get one?
That's the whole reason why we've been working with the states and territories on procuring and on making sure that we are targeting rapid antigen tests where they're needed. We've been providing millions of doses to the aged care sector already to make sure they can test where necessary, along with other vulnerable sectors. We've been providing and are providing millions of doses to the states and territories to help them provide rapid antigen tests for free to close contacts, in addition to the free testing, PCR testing for people who are symptomatic with COVID.
For the
and
schools?
yes, with the hundreds of millions extra on order, that's what we're working with the states and territories for, to make sure we can provide what they need for the appropriate restarting of school and the support of testing where it's necessary in schools, where the states and territories decide to apply it and how each of them decide to apply it.
I mean, we were told early in the week that they're not due till the middle of Feb. School's starting very soon. I know a lot of parents are very nervous about sending their kids back to school with numbers as high as they are. The kids that have been vaxxed have only had one dose. If a kid gets it at school, then it goes through the family. Then it can be weeks as it goes through the family. That's people out of work. I mean, you've got 2 daughters yourself. How nervous are you about sending your kids to school?
Look, I want to see my kids back at school. They've both had their first dose, and I encourage all Australian parents to do that. And if you've got a booking that's in a few weeks' time, have a look and see if you can bring it forward, because we've seen many more places open up in the last week or two of additional booking slots. There are plenty of doses out there, so follow through and get that done. There will be disruptions that continue due to COVID and Omicron, but shutting our schools down indefinitely is not an option for that. We know that Omicron is around 70% less severe in terms of its health impacts than previous variations of COVID-19. We know that children continue to suffer relatively mild impacts from COVID-19 infections, and we've now got vaccinations running through. So we want to see kids back at school. We're working with the states and territories there on their individual plans to work with their teachers, their workforces, and to make sure that we can have as strong a start to the school year as possible, and then to keep that going.
Let's talk forklifts. Now, we know the PM, he's not into them now, but the internet has been having a great time making fun of Scott Morrison's suggestion yesterday that seemed to just come out of nowhere, that we lower the age of forklift drivers. I mean, you've got 2 primary school-aged daughters. When do you think they'll be ready to, have their first spin around the warehouse?
Well, it didn't come out of nowhere. The Trucking Association made a suggestion and asked for the suggestion to be looked at, and that's precisely what's happened. Now, everyone's agreed, including Scott Morrison and the federal government, that no, 16 is too young. 9 and 10-year-old is definitely too young, although I reckon my kids could wreak a bit of havoc with some forklifts if they were given the chance.
I think which is part of the problem.
No, it's not happening, it was an industry association proposal. The industry wanted it looked at. It's been looked at. The answer's no.
Tell us the truth. Did the French sell us a bunch of forklifts that Scott Morrison's trying to offload?
Well, I've just noticed the French have been taking some stances that look very Australian-like when it comes to vaccine requirements for visitors and sports stars, and that is a double vax requirement. So welcome that cooperation with France, and more seriously, welcome very much the cooperation with France on Tonga.
Okay.
Minister, where they and many other nations are working with us.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We appreciate your time, Minister.
No worries. Thanks, guys.